Okay, so it's the fourth day of Buddhism for daily life, and I will briefly tell you what we have been discussing the other day. So, uh, we were discussing about the nature of happiness, right? We were trying to look at certain things with happiness, and why we got into the happiness part is because we were asking the question why, or what's the primary existence of our life, why do we live, right? We were trying to understand that, and then we figured somewhere down the line that although we say it's our responsibility, it's our duties, it's the wishes, da da da, underneath all that, when we fulfill our responsibilities, we feel nice about it, we feel gratified. When we fulfill our wishes, it feels great. So behind all this, it seems that the fundamental factor that which keeps us going is the happiness or satisfaction. So we also used three words: happiness, satisfaction, and bliss. We are not going to talk about what bliss is, but we were looking at what satisfaction and happiness. And we also noticed that there's hope in this. If we don't have the hope, a lot of things are not going to be there for us. But then I also mentioned something slightly, I touched base on this thing, that happiness or any emotion for that matter is happening right now, right? What we feel, the emotions are happening right now. What has happened in the past, and we don't feel them right now. We might recall them, and we might have a new emotion right now. But with this happiness, I'll only take the happiness side of it. The happiness that we feel right now will make us want to enjoy that moment again. I'll go into detail. Think about a habit, any habit that we have, right? Kayaking, let's say. We like kayaking. One day we tried kayaking, we liked it, and then we want to make it happen again because doing that was very fulfilling, right? And I have such a habit. I was very addicted to surfing at one point. Don't worry about it, bless you. I was very addicted to surfing because surfing, when you get on the surfboard, it becomes a very liberating moment. It's all but you and the surfboard and the wave. That's it. So I drive many hours, 6, 8 hours, even go to a different country just to have that moment because it's very liberating. And why I have the hope of visiting more places: Bali, Indonesia, Phuket, Thailand, Philippines, Siargao. I would want to go there again because I have developed a happiness while I was enjoying it, and that makes me wanting to repeat it again. So if you look at it, the happiness and hope, they are sort of intertwined. With the happiness, we are hopeful that we would want to recreate it, and that same hope keeps us going. And when we get there, we are happy. It makes us being more hopeful. But I'm only telling about the things that we like. There are certain things that we don't like. For example, if you somehow fall into that lake, you will start hating it because there's a lot of sulfur in it and it smells. It really smells, right? On certain days, especially after the ice is over, after the winter is over, it smells for a period of time, and you might not want to fall into the lake again. So the same way that we like or we yearn for happiness, we also want to get away from things that we don't like, and we are hopeful we would not come across that again in our life. And with the things we like, we are hopeful that it will come to our life again. So you see, it has this cause and effect, the causality. We can, since it's a cycle, we don't know where to start, but let's arbitrarily take happiness. We are happy right now for something, and we would want to recreate that moment. So that causes the later on hope, and then we are hopeful. Being hopeful itself keeps us going. It makes us satisfied, gratified, and it makes us want to become happy again. So you see, there's a causality in that, cause and effect, happiness and hope, cause and effect. So that I just want to show you. Some people even call it samsara. Well, we'll get to what samsara is at a later point. So what I basically pointed out or outlined last week was that the nature of happiness, that in order to become happy, like the gross happiness, the usual happiness that a teenager, a young boy would have, we need to have time, money and energy. And that's a lot of work, and there's a great effort behind that. In fact, we get into this thing called the rat race that people call, in order to gain those resources: time, energy and money. You go to the gym, you want to keep fit, you want to do your yoga in order to gain your energy. You want to work hard for a set of days and then take off days, so you put a lot of effort on that time, although you can't get as much as time you would ideally want to. And then of course the most governing factor, money. We would like to have money, not because we like money per se, we like what money can do for us, right? So because of all this, we cannot rest in peace. We keep going in this rat race, and in order to become happy, we need to have time, money and energy. And the other thing that we notice is that the cost of happiness is ever increasing. It's like inflation in Canada or inflation anywhere. It's ever increasing. When we were a child, we were very happy with just few things, but now we need more and more things. We need more and more things to come across. And the other part is, even when we get time, money and energy, we do certain things to become happy. Our wishes don't come true all the time. There might be people who come in between us. There might be weather which comes in between us. There might be the government policy. They say, don't do this, don't do that, and you're prohibited from doing that. It might be the society. So something might come between me and what I want to do, and naturally I'm angry about it, I'm disheartened about it, I have a pain, a frustration about it. So that happens when we try to look for happiness. And I'm so sorry that I have to tell all the negative things about happiness when happiness is such a good thing. It's sort of an oxymoron. So then happiness also comes as a package. I was sharing the story of that nun who wanted to meditate and who got a robe, but then end up having more and more things. So that's the way it is. Like, even back in the day when we were doing sports, when our muscles were sore, the coach used to say, no pain, no gain. So you need to have that baggage in order to be happy. In fact, there's this thing, middle-aged men and people who are married, they look for in their marriage certificate, which is the expiration date. That's one certificate where you don't get an expiry, right? But you look for it. Again, I'm not trying to be anti-establishment. All these things are nice, and some people do enjoy their connections. But most often in our life, that we come across very negative interactions. And what happens to me is that people don't share good things about their lives. Very seldom, when things are better, they forget me. When things are bad, they come and tell me, this happened to me, that happened to me. So I'm trying to be very impartial to all the bad news I hear. But in amidst all this bad news, what I see is that the happiness, they were looking for happiness, but eventually it became problematic, right? And then I want people to be truly happy and satisfied and blissful. So let's try to see why and how we can do that, and what stops us from doing that. And then the other part is that the happiness has this nature. It's like a tank that we are trying to fill. So we try to fill it today. We do everything under the moon and the sun to fill that tank of happiness, but tomorrow morning it's all drained out, it's gone, right? And we can even say that there are 6 tanks: the tank of eye, ear, nose, tongue, touch, or 5 tanks. Those are the 5 tanks we want to keep filling every day. We try to indulge ourselves in great tastes, great aromas, great scenery, great comforts. But the next day morning when we wake up, the greatest aroma we had is gone. We can't seem to contain it. There's no way to contain it. So back in the day, a lot of people were in pursuit of how to contain this happiness. How do we have an eternal happiness which wouldn't last, which wouldn't die down? It's like a battery where you wouldn't run out of the battery. like a Tesla car where it can do unlimited miles. We still haven't found it. And then the other part is this happiness is nice, but I said that with the happiness you also have hope to repeat that happiness. With that hope comes the longing, the yearning. The best way to find this is that back in the day I was into movies, and when I was looking at when I was sorry, I'm just admitting someone on Zoom. When I was looking at these movies, there are sequels and there are a series of movies. If you're really into that story, you would wait until the next episode is released, yearning, right? Imagine that you like something in your life, you hope that it would come to you. It doesn't come to you because there is a particular date that it will be released or it will come to you. There'll be a lot of longing. Your partner is abroad, he has vacation in August, and I'm waiting until he returns back. He or she returns back. Oh, my child, until his foreign education is over, until he returns back. So that part is there with the sorry. Somehow my Zoom is acting very weird today. I don't have the waiting room unblocked. Don't worry about it. I'll keep admitting you. Okay. So okay. So the yearning and the longing, and the momentariness of happiness we discussed, and the other thing is that happiness is always associated. Is always associated with this originality. The physical originality. You know, when we buy a new car, we would like it to stay in the mint condition. No one, sometimes we like the rugged antiques also. But usually when we buy new things, we like the newness, the mint condition of it. But it's almost impossible for the mint condition to be physically intact after a few years. The houses, we buy the houses. For example, this monastery is very new, like it was recently refurbished. 10 years down the line, it's going to look not so good. And that's the way it is. But just focus on this. Even if your physical object is in the mint condition, your mind loses it. Is that correct? Now, for example, if you take a car, I remember the first car I bought, which was not even a brand new car, which was a second-hand, like a used car. But I loved it. I did so many things. I plugged in lights and all the decoration, and it remained mint pretty much. But then after 6 months and a year, I just didn't care for my car very much. I just lost interest. So you can keep the physical object in mint condition, but still your mind is going to change and you can't be happy the same way. You would want an upgrade. So exactly what happened afterwards, I traded that car and bought a new car. I wanted an upgrade. It was a brand new car. It was brand new for some time. Until the day I sold, it was pretty brand new, but I lost interest and I traded for another car. So you have this nature in happiness. Things change. Even if things don't change in here, things really change physically. Now look at I will discuss a person, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Back in the day, he was like the hunky six-pack guy, and then now he looks different. He doesn't have all that muscle tone anymore. He's getting old. And I used to know a Miss Sri Lanka from Sri Lanka. She was the Miss Sri Lanka in the 1973. She passed away recently, 1973 or 1953, I can't remember. But she was very old at the end. She looked very elegant, very gorgeous. But then she wasn't the same person who won the Miss Sri Lanka. She changed. That happens to all of us. We change. And on the other hand, we would also seek novelty despite of all these physical changes. And then I discussed also another thing very quickly. Imagine that you get a golf stick where you can, it's a magic golf stick. You can play unlimited golf with it. Every time you hit, it goes right onto the hole, right? Straight shot. You have a magic pair of boots. You play soccer with it. Every time you kick, it's a goal. If that's the case in our life, if everything becomes so beautiful, so perfect, we might lose it. We might not need that perfection also in our life. In fact, we would like some imperfection in our life for us to calibrate ourselves. If everything is so good, maybe it's a very hypothetical situation for most of us. Here and there things have been bad. It hasn't always been good. But imagine that everything is good. For example, it's very beautiful now. It's a spring, and you see here a trumpeter swan swimming over there. If there were trumpeters all year round, we would get bored of that. In fact, I don't get bored of it, but I see the lake every time. It doesn't amuse me much more anymore. So no matter, I've also noticed this thing. I used to do a lot of whale watching back in the day. So you go on the boat 20 kilometers, 40 kilometers out to the sea, and then you wait for the whale to appear. So there are humpback whales and different types of whales. It's a great scene to capture the nose dive or the tails up dive. It's a rare sight. But after so many years, I've been seeing so many tail dives, I just lost interest of that. Right? So that happens. If you have the perfect magic golf club or the magic soccer boots or the magic anything in life, it wouldn't become fun anymore. Right? And I also mentioned that the best thing in life, the most happy events that happened in our life are unplannable. They were surprises. So the problem is that if we really want to become happy, but the things that makes us happy are surprise, unplannable things, we can never plan for it. The moment we try to plan for it, it doesn't become so surprising or happy. So you see, the way we are trying to acquire happiness, of course we live for happiness. That's what we strive for. But there are so many issues associated with that. Right? Now, my objective is not to, be pessimistic about happiness. I'm trying to figure out a way how do we become happy minus all these effects. Right? So that's the task here. And we also looked and saw that happiness is always inhibited. We cannot become 100% happy even if forget everything. You have the money, time, energy, still you can't become 100% happy because there are things which inhibits you. For example, the most good things, happy things in life are prohibited. Either they are prohibited by law or by your parents. I see a lot of kids who visit the temple. In fact, the parents doesn't like them when they are too happy. When they jump up and down, when they are very happy and elated, parents want them to calm down and stop what they're doing. So even as a kid, a lot of things are not possible. And everyone has the fear of sin. So because of that, you can't do a lot of things which would ideally make you happy. And people are also afraid of criticism by others. I'm doing this, it's my happiness. But what would the society think? What would my peers think? What would my parents think? What would my colleagues think? Right? So even if you forget the societal pressure, the external pressure, you still have the pressure of self-criticism. That would limit you from doing things that would make you happy. So in a way, you have the wanting to become happy, but there are so many things which restrict you from becoming happy, inhibits from you becoming happy. I also mentioned that children, the crazy people, they don't have these boundaries. But again, we don't want to be crazy and we can't be the child. Right? So it's again inhibited. But I also mentioned that we can start living by virtues, and living by a virtue will make you very happy. However, the problem with virtues is that you would want to live with virtues, but you still have the need, you have the desire. So you are living by virtues not because your desire is low, it's because you want to stick to that principle. Right? People, for example, in Buddhism, there's a very common thing called the 5 precepts. I will refrain from killing, I will refrain from lying, etc., etc. Although people want to observe these 5 precepts and stick to this virtue, their heart says, I would like to have a little bit of fun. And ideally, I would want to break them. But I don't want to break them because it might be a demeritorious or a sinful activity. So because of that, I don't do it. So the thing with virtue is that if you come up with a set of principles, and if you still have the desire in you, it's going to be a very difficult life for you because you want to do it, but you can't do it because of your self-imposed set of virtues. So that I see with the virtues and sticking to principles. I'm not saying sticking to principles or virtues is bad. It's nice, but it still has this effect. So we cannot be 100% satisfied in that. And another great form of being happy is the benevolence. Being benevolent, being helpful, do what you feel like doing to help other people. Volunteer, which is very nice, but again you are limited by resources. You could ideally want to volunteer, but you don't have enough time, you don't have enough money, or you don't have enough energy for that. Sometimes even if you have that, you still might be a little stingy sometimes. Okay, fine, I would like to help, but only up to $1,000 not $5,000, not $10,000. So we can become stingy even if we are not restricted by the other resources. And the other part of sticking to virtues and being benevolent, behind all that, there's a very negative trait which could develop. That is the ego. That altruism, being altruistic is very nice, but right next to altruism, being altruistic, you can develop this major ego. I am a very altruistic guy, I am a very benevolent guy, and all the others who are not benevolent are inferior to me. Right? Try becoming a vegetarian for a few years, it happens to you. I was a vegetarian for 10 plus years, and during certain parts I found, why are these bad people eating so much meat? Right? So that happens. You take any practice, any virtue, even meditating in the morning, doing yoga in the morning, even that will sort of make you judgmental towards other people who are not sticking to that. So these are some of the things which are associated with happiness. But then today, while this is all there, I also want to focus on another aspect of happiness, another interesting characteristic of happiness, that the happiness is very relative. And today what we are trying to do is we are trying to get to the bottom of it. We are trying to find that conclusive answer. Why is happiness acting this way? Why does it have these characteristics? And we'll look at the relativity of happiness. We looked at the Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy the other day. The pyramid where you have your basic needs in the bottom, and then your love, need of self-esteem, etc. in the next tiers, and the self-actualization on the top. When we are kids, we don't want anything. We don't need love from a partner. We don't need self-esteem. We want to play. We simply want to do that. But once you're a teenager, you like hanging out with the attracted sex, male or female, and then you would want to get into a relationship. That need is there, and after some time, you are even above that. You want the power. You want the social strata to be around you. So what we like, what makes us happy, changes from our age. From one age to the other, it changes. When you are really young, you would be happy with stuffed animals. Then you would want a PS5 or a PS4. Then you want a relationship, a vehicle, children. And then towards the end of it, when you're middle-aged, once you're middle-aged, I want to play golf. So you take the age-appropriate happinesses. So what I wanted to show is that the same person during his lifetime, now lifetime doesn't have to be the chronological age, it can be the psychological age. During that psychological age, he has different things which makes him happy. So the happiness changes. It's very relative from age to age. And the other thing is that it's even relative from the time of the day. Like in the morning, we would not like to listen to hard rock metallic music unless you are a metallic fan, metal fan. But we want to listen to more calm, oriental, instrumental, yarny type of music. And we have a mood based on each time of the day. Even if we take today, 11th of May 2023, our happinesses, or what could have made us happy, changed from hour to hour. Right? It's not a static thing. So it changes, keeps on changing. And the other part is the environment. from environment to environment, it changes. Now, you are at a monastery today, and you could go to a wedding ceremony or a reception or a nightclub. From environment to environment, the same person becomes happy in different ways, right? So happiness is very relative, it's very changing. And the other part is that we of course know it's very relative from individual to individual. It's very relative from individual to individual. Take an example. There's a park that I visit close by, Victoria Park. I met a person one day. She was almost in tears, and I told you, like, every time I go out, when I meet people, they come and tell me the things which bother them in their lives, which I think which makes them feel good about it. But I also want to help them and listening and empathize with them. So what she told me was she lost her husband somewhere closer to this park, and every time she passes this park, it makes her very sad. So she just stopped her car and then came here and was crying about it. And I also see children and the parents. I'm sure that the children would have fond memories of the same park, right? So from person to person, you look at the same image, but two people feel two different emotions. It's different from person to person. Look at take a particular model of a vehicle. I like a Ford Jeep, but the same Ford Jeep was the Jeep where my family got into a car crash. I lost everyone during that, and because of that, every time I see a Ford Jeep, I feel very sad. That could be not literally mine, but I'm telling an example. So someone could think, oh, the Ford Jeep is where I had my first date. So two people would have two different emotions to what you see, what you hear, what you taste, smell. Based on any of these sensory inputs, two people could feel completely different emotions. One very good, one very bad, one might be neutral, right? So we could even say that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like, take two people, right? One person would love someone so dearly, but the other person would hate that person, right? And they say that newborn kids are very cute. But back in the day, I was thinking, why do you call these newborn kids cute? I mean, right after the womb, they look, they look quite different. And well, of course, for the mother, it's the apple of the eye of the mother and the father. But for an external person, they are not even properly formed, and they looked like they had spent a lot of time in the tummy, so they don't look good. Well, they become cute when they are 2 months, 3 months old, 1 year, but not right in the beginning, right? And they're covered with poop and all the fluids. So I also see a lot of people getting married. Again, I'm not trying to say anything bad about it. I'm just telling my observation. So one person is rejected by a partner, completely hated and rejected. And then the same person becomes a very wonderful person to the next person. And when I bought my first car, someone must have rejected it, saying, I have done with this car, I'm going to give it to someone else. I don't want it anymore. I want this other thing. But for me, it was a nice addition, right? See, someone rejects it and someone is willing to hold it. So it's the same item or the same person or the same place, but for two different people, two emotions. So very relative. I just want you to concentrate very closely on this nature of the happiness. Take music, take fashion, perfume, anything that you take. Happiness has a relativity in it. So it's based on individual memories, their paradigms, how they think about it, and their memories and what they have come across, what they think. So the question I want to ask you today, I've been asking a lot of questions every day. This pleasure, is it dependent on external things or is it dependent on internal things? Now that's the golden question today. Is the pleasure dependent on external things or is it based on internal things? What do you think?
It's based on your interpretation.
based on the interpretation. And the interpretation is internal or external?
It's your internal interpretation of external
things. Right? What do you think?
I've been sort of, I would say it's mostly internal, but there are certain external circumstances that are so extreme that they sort of overwhelm you. Even if you're like mindful, and there still are some things where it's just like boom, like it just hits
Very
your
good.
heart.
Very good. So that seems to be the idea. So what do you think? Is the pleasure, is it an external thing or an internal thing? What do you think, Kristen, Sean, Vincent? Okay.
It might be stimulated by something external, but I think it's experienced internally.
Right. Now, where do we draw the line? Which part is the stimulation and which part is the happiness? Let's take a very simple example. Up until now, or most of your life, usual person, your happiness was because of an external thing. Why I'm saying that? Because every time you wanted to become happy, you went in search of a person, a place, a pastime, or a possession for peace. Or you went after your senses, your images, your ear, your nose, tongue, or your touch. So that's what we went after, our five senses, or for peace. Right? So it was always coming from that side, but we also, it looks counterintuitive. We can also deduce and say that although it seems to be coming from them, it is internal, because that's what I just mentioned. It's very relative. So if something to be very relative, it must be having an internal component as well, external from the physical reality, right? But let's see what the Buddhist view on that, or what the Pali Canon says about that. Now, I was mentioning Pali Canon. I mentioned a little bit about what the Pali Canon is. Pali is the old dead language now. Nobody speaks Pali except the Pali Canon is written in Pali. So that's why it's called the Pali Canon. And if you are interested, you can go to sites like Sutta Central or access to insight.org and find the Pali Canon. Just go type on Google and Pali Canon, you will find Pali Canon. I want to take a discussion which happened with Buddha. It's called the Nibbedika Sutta. Sutta or Sutra, you might come across that word. Sutra means a dialogue or a discussion or a discourse coming from a particular book. It's like any book like Bible or Quran, like a verse. But instead of being a verse, it's like a specific story. So Sutta. And Nibbedika means the exposition or the explanation of the penetrative explanation, exposition. So why very penetrative means that in this discussion, he want to get to the bottom of it, put it under a microscope and then see what exactly is the dividing factor between the external part of happiness and the internal part of happiness. So it perfectly fits what we want to answer today. So the Nibbedika Sutta says that there are 5 things that we would want to get to know. The sensual pleasures should be known. A word which is given for the sensual pleasures is called karma. Karma. I'm sure that you have come across this word karma somewhere. There's Kama Sutra, which is a erotic sort of a art form, even in tantric practices. And karma generally means sensual pleasures. Now, people only take it to your physical sexual pleasures, but karma could mean anything. It could mean the pleasure that we have through our eyes, through our ears, listening to nice music. That is called karma. So the first part is sensual pleasures, which makes us happy in turn. So the second part is we want to see the source or the origin for these sensual pleasures. And the third part is we want to see what are the differences between different sensual pleasures. The fourth is we want to see the repercussions and the consequences of these sensual pleasures, and then finally look at the cessation and the practice that leads to cessation of these sensual pleasures. So those are the 5 things that we want to know, but don't try to be bothered about the 5 or 4 things. We will also see that in Buddhism you would find often 2 words, the arising and the cessation. Arising of the world, cessation of the world, arising of the pleasure, cessation of the pleasure. So you would find that 2 words very often, but let's look at the first part. What is sensual pleasure, or what is karma? That's the first part that we want to know. And in order to be happy, like I said, we need the 5 sensual pleasures from the eye, ear, nose, touch, etc. Or we need the 4 P's: people, places, pastimes, or possessions. So those are things that we want to become happy. Now, sights perceived by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, and sensual and arousing. Those are the sensual pleasures. I'm reading out of the sutta. Sights perceived by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Same goes to sounds that we know by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Now what Buddha says is that those things, these are not sensual pleasures. Wait a minute. So sights perceived by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing are not sensual pleasures. Is that correct? We just said we want to look at something, and that's how we become happy, or pleasure, sensual pleasure. But Buddha is saying what we see is not a sensual pleasure. Then let's see what it says. There are 5 kinds of sensual stimulations. In fact, these are called not karma or sensual pleasures. They are the ingredients for sensual pleasures, or called karma guna. Now let's try to understand that. The ingredients for sensual stimulation in the world, which can be seen as good, bad, likable, dislikable, or despicable. These things are dependent from species to species. Now I'll take a swan in that lake. They like eating, they love, in fact they love eating the water lilies. The beavers, they love eating water lilies. But do we like water lilies? Can we process that mud water? We can't, right? So both of us see the same lily, but for him it's a likable thing. For us it's not a likable thing. But not because I have made something cooked up in my mind, because there's a physical limitation. I see squirrels, I see geese outside there during the winter at -20, -30. But we can't do that. We have an optimal range where we are most comfortable. So you see, there's a comfortable range for people or human, for any being, and you can operate only during that range. What is beyond, above, or below are uncomfortable for you. And that's your physical range. And what we see can be interpreted differently, but there's also a physical limitation to it. I'll take another example. Now when we see the table, it's made out of wood. It doesn't look like a food to me. But if you take a termite, or if you take a rat, who would like to chew, this looks food to them, but it's not food to us. So there are certain things which are food to us, and there are certain things which are not food to us. So we would not be hungry or craving to eat that when we see a table or a plank of wood. But for a termite, he'll be saying, wow, I had there's such a nice delicacy on my table now, right? And that's not the same thing what the swan would say, or the beaver would say. Beaver would say, wow, water lilies are coming up. I love them because it's my food. But for me, it's not food. I cannot simply eat it and process it. I can't eat grass because as a human, I'm not capable of processing vegetation like that. A cow or a monkey is capable of doing that because they have a different gut system where they can process all this, but we can't. So it's not food to me. However, I'll also take an example. When I was traveling in the Philippines, one day I was given a plate of dog meat. I was still vegetarian at the point, but then he insisted me, so I said might as well try that. So when I was eating the dog meat, people don't usually eat dog meat because dogs are such nice pets. But in there, it's very normal, it's very cultural to eat dog meat. Not in the city of Manila, but up north in a tribal area. I also traveled in Cambodia. They have snake on a stick, like a barbecued snake on a stick by the roadside. People eat it. It's like a hot dog. There's a snake on a stick.
It tastes like chicken. Does it taste like chicken?
Very good question. Now, how does it taste? To me, everything more or less tastes the same thing. If you carefully look at it, I mean, there are differences, there are variations in taste, but if I offer that dog meat or snake meat to my mother, she would go crazy about it. She would not want even to have it on her house, or forget her plate, but not even in her house. You could be very disgusted with that, or you could think this is a wonderful delicacy, but the taste is not very different from chicken or beef, for that matter. I mean, there's a slight difference, but it's not as much you would think that it is. So where does this come from? Now, that is what Buddha says. We take the taste, we eat it, we think that this is sensual pleasure, but it is not really sensual pleasure. What we eat is the ingredient for sensual pleasure, kama guna. But kama, sensual pleasure, is something else. And your sensual pleasure is based on, like what you mentioned, it's based on how you think about it, how you process it, how you interpret it. Right? And we need to now dissociate between those two. We need to enjoy, or we need to not enjoy, we need to perceive the kama guna, or the ingredient of sensual pleasure, and we need to experience the sensual pleasure in two baskets now. It's a very tricky and a fine line, but the only thing we can do is we can keep watching at things. We can look at the images and then try to see, okay, the image is there. It's, of course, it wouldn't give me the same feeling to the person who's next to me. We would have two different feelings. Image is the ingredient, while the sensual pleasure is what's cooking up in my mind. Having said that, we also need to distinguish between I cannot be happy looking at, or I cannot even eat the water lilies in the mud. I can't survive at -30 or -50 outside because it's not my typical range. But within this typical range, which is within this ideal range of human existence, now I can't listen to a sound which has too many decibels. It's difficult. But then even within the decibel range, you have certain people telling nice words, make you happy, and there are certain people who make you annoyed. It's within the same decibel range. Is that correct? It's the same sound or same decibel range. It's not physically. It falls within the physical desirable range. However, one noise can make you happy, and the similar noise can make you unhappy, or the same noise can make one person happy and one person unhappy. So now we need to carefully go and look into the ingredient part of these sensual pleasures, or the kama guna, and the sensual pleasures which are cooking up in our mind. So in here, Buddha says a nice word, sankappa rago purisassa kamo. It's a Pali saying, but it's very beautiful. I like it very much. What it says is that the greedy intentions, desire is person's sensual pleasure. The world's pretty things aren't the sensual pleasures. We'll look at it again. Greedy intentions or the desire is the sensual pleasure, but what we see, what we hear, they are not the sensual pleasures. They are but the ingredients of they are only the ingredients of the sensual pleasure, not the sensual pleasure. So now it's a very fine and a tricky line. Through meditation, what we try to do is we try to understand where do we draw the line. Which part is the sensual pleasure? Which part is the sensual ingredient for the sensual pleasure? Now this might sound very simple, but although this is simple, this is the most profound thing that you could come across if you can differentiate between those two. I'll go to marketing. So in marketing, there's this thing called, for any good that we want to purchase, there's a functional value and there's a perceived value. You take a watch, a brand of watch, there's Patek Philippe, there's Casio watches, the cheap ones, there's Rolex. There are many types of watches. They most of the time show more or less the same time. Of course, there might be a few more jewels in one. Maybe the time is slightly more accurate in the other one. But we don't need a lot of accuracy in our day-to-day life, right? But then we go after the brand. So even if the physical object is not that, there's no major difference between the cheaper one and the expensive one, the perceived value can be very high. So the functional value and the perceived value can be two things. So the same thing, we look at an image, that image has an image value and it has a perceived value. And if we can understand that this perceived value is based on what we have come across, how we think about it, our paradigm, the previous experience that we had. If our sensual pleasures are based on something like that, if we can understand that, we can probably try to find a way where we can have these sensual pleasures minus all these negative traits that I just discussed. But before trying to enjoy that sensual pleasure, we need to find how it is constructed or how it is made. We need to understand the mechanics of that. Now, when I say mechanics, is someone making those sensual pleasures and giving it to us, or are we cooking them up in our mind? We are doing it by ourselves. So in a way, this whole exercise is to look into what you are doing with your mind. How are you doing it? And that's what we are trying to do. So let's get into this whole thing, and I'll take another example, a quick example. Let's take a lady who's married to a lovely husband. They both love each other, and she's also a sister to another sibling, and the mother is there. The child, she has a child, and she has a boss, and she has colleagues. So few people, right? Same person, few people. Now each person, let's call her Karen. Different people perceive Karen in different ways. The boss in a particular way, the colleagues in a particular way, the lady who greets her every day in the morning at the shop differently, husband differently, child differently, mother differently, but it's the same person. So we can call this physical nature, or the physical nature of that person, the ingredient, roughly, right? The physical nature, the ingredient, and what each person think about her is the sensual part, is the calmer part, the sensual pleasure part. Of course, when I'm only taking the sensual pleasure here, but the same thing applies to sensual displeasure, right? The same opposite. We are talking about two sides of the coin. One is the pleasure side, the other part is the displeasure side. It's the same thing. And our pleasures are based on conceptual desires. Conceptual desires, that's the core idea that I want to deliver today. A fantastic example that I remember is a great Greek tragedy by Sophocles called the King Oedipus Rex. Have you heard about that tragedy? So I'll tell you. No? Have you? No. Okay, this is what happened to King Oedipus. So there was King Oedipus. He wasn't King Oedipus. So one day there was a boy who was born to a royal family, and there were astrologers, I think. And when they looked at the birth chart of the king, they figured out that this little baby, this little princess, is one day going to kill the father and then ruin the kingdom, right? So what they did was, like they do back in the Greek Roman days, they put him into a basket and then send him along the river. That's what they do usually, like to Julius Caesar, right? So this little baby went down, the little infant went down, and the neighboring country someone picked that basket, and they took to the queen who did not have a child. So they were very happy that they have gotten a child. So they adopted this little king. So he was named Oedipus. And then when the age came, he was offered the kingdom, but then maybe I'm not telling the exact story, but let me tell the version that I remember. So at the deathbed of that king, he said, well, you are not our real son, your father is someone else, and you are not our real son. So then he wanted to go in search of his real father and real mother. He said, I'm not going to accept your kingdom. I'm going to go in search of my real father and mother. So anyway, he set out, because he didn't know whom to ask, because that parents died, I think. So he was going, and then he went, and then he crossed his kingdom to another area. And as he was crossing the kingdom, there was a bridge, and there was another person who wanted to cross that bridge. So there was a argument about the right of way, and they got into a fight, and then he killed this guy. Right, so he killed this guy, and then went into that kingdom. And then we went to that kingdom. He heard that the king of that kingdom has left, and there's a vacancy for the king, and people are looking for a suitable prince. And then he went to that kingdom. People picked him up, and then they coronated him as the king. And then the previous king's widowed wife was there. Naturally, he would want to marry her, and then she was good looking, and then he married the queen also. After some time, there was this discovery he made. The lady who took that little baby and put in the basket came out and said, my dear king, you have made a terrible mistake. You are in fact the baby who was expelled from this country, this kingdom, and you have married your mother, and the person you met on the way is the father or the king who was going in search of his lost son. So that's why it's called the great tragedy of King Oedipus. In fact, later on, Sigmund Freud brings this up to say the Oedipus syndrome, how a boy would have a likeness towards the mother, and the Oedipus syndrome. But we are not going to, in psychology you discuss that. But that is not my area. That is not what I want to think. What I wanted to think is what happened to King Oedipus. For a moment, before he learned the news, he looked at that queen and thought, this is a very desirable queen. Looking at that queen, it made him so happy. But when he realized the sad story, he took the pin from his mother, the hairpin, and he blinded himself. So that's why it's a very tragic story, right? So just with a small change in his mind concept, a very desirable sensual pleasure turned out to be the biggest displeasure in his life, right? Maybe killing that guy for the right of way made him very happy. I did justice, I taught him a lesson. But then when he learned that I killed my father, it made him very unhappy, right? So the image that he see did not change. He saw the mother, or he saw that lady, and he saw that same lady again. What he saw was the same thing, but how he perceived it changed. So now you can understand the ingredient for the sensual pleasure and the sensual pleasure are two things. And the next part is, what I said is that the greed or the desire is what creates the sensual pleasure. In order for you to become happy, you really have to like it. You cannot be happy about something that you are neutral about or does not care for too much. You can only be happy with something that you like, and you can only be disheartened or displeasured with something you hate. Right? Now this might sound very simple, but if you really think about it, it's very profound. This explains a lot of things that we come across in a day-to-day life, right? Our pleasures and displeasures. That is all what we need to be looking at, pleasures and displeasures. So that's what I wanted to tell you today, and it's almost an hour. But let's get into the questions we have. What do you think about it? Do you think what I said is fair, or is it wrong? What do you think? I'll ask the people from Zoom first. What do you think?
don't think it's wrong. I think it just is. Yeah, it all goes back to perception and circumstances, and yeah, the way we make judgments about the circumstances.
Very good, very good. Now let's. Now we know that everything we discussed here, like Jen mentioned, these are internal things. These are actually traits of our mind. So the traits of our mind applies to the traits of our happiness. So let's now try to understand our mind. In fact, we initially looked at the characteristics of our happiness, but they are nothing but a reflection of our own mind. That is how our mind behaves, right? That is how our concepts behave. That is how our desires behave. So let's try to look into that. Vincent, what do you think about it? Is that okay? Christian? I agree. Okay. Please disagree with me. At the beginning, I said, don't agree with me and don't throw it away completely. I want you to take this and think about it. You know, maybe it might sound so obvious, but then there's this moment of epiphany. You figure that out and everything looks so clear. I've been doing this all my life, and you know, it really struck me, and then I changed my course of life, my life. I'll tell you what happened to me when I became a monk. I think I told you the other day. I was at Marina Bay Sands, Singapore. It was like a 7-star, $1,000 hotel room. Actually, I didn't pay $1,000. I got it for free because I was hosted for an event there. I get it every year. Every year I would go there and spend my time in the infinity pool, etc. But then when I was eating the food there, which was a 7-course great spread and all, while eating that food, I felt the same thing. The taste is not pleasure. Taste is just an ingredient. It's just taste. But what makes it good or bad is what I'm cooking up in here. And at that moment, I figured out everything else is such in your life. All the pleasures and displeasures are based on a concept that you have in your mind, on your interpretation. But I'm not saying that there are desirable ranges for our life. Hot and cold. We cannot be in plus 70 degrees or minus 70 degrees. There's a desirable range. 25 degrees is good. But even in this 25 degrees, I can look at the beautiful lake, or I can look at the lake which disgusts me. Or I can look at the Toronto downtown which is beautiful or which disgusts me. Right? Or I can listen to metallic music which is very annoying, or metallic music that I like very much. Right? So it's very relative, and it's very much based on our concepts. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Any comments? No?
Yeah, just never take a while to digest that.
Right, let's digest it. Very good. Let's digest it. And what we are now trying to do, we are trying to do two things. We are trying to learn about our mind, first part, the characteristics of our mind. And the second part is that we are trying to differentiate or find the line where the ingredients and the pleasures are different. Pleasures or displeasures, they are the same, two sides of the same coin. And you can do it in your daily life. I'll teach you how to do that. In fact, when I said I don't get disgusted by things. I don't know, maybe I was always like that. I remember back in the day when I was living in a sort of a village, not a town. There was a place I had to pass, and they were slaughtering chickens, right? It happened, you take the chicken and then you just chop the head off and the body flies for some time. I was coming from my school, not kindergarten, maybe grade 2, 3 maybe. That's when I started walking by myself. I was just looking at it. And one day my mom found that I was looking at it, and then she was very upset. Why is this little kid looking at that disgusting sight? But again, I was thinking it really did not make a change in me. I mean, it was just a scene. So for some people, take the owner of the business, he might have really liked it, because more he chops heads, more money he makes. And for an animal activist, like a PETA activist, a vegetarian, they might think, what a horrible sight. But what is it really? Right? What is it really? And so because of that, I had no problem, even when I was a vegetarian, eating that dog meat. In fact, that time, we had a nice dog in our temple in Sri Lanka. Her name was Tisha, and she was a beautiful dog, and her hand got hurt. So we were taking care of that hand. And when I went to that tribal group, when they were serving me the dog meat, the most delicious part of the dog meat is the paw of the dog, like this paw. So I was having two of them, right? Because they said, why don't you take the paw? And the first thing I remembered was Tisha's paw, our friendly dog's paw, right? But see, again, I had no problem eating it, because I understand the difference between the sensual pleasure and the sensual ingredient for that pleasure. If you close your eyes, if you don't know what meat it is, you'll be perfectly fine eating that. The moment you start thinking that way, that is when your emotions kick in, right? So we'll discuss about it later. And please excuse me for saying the disgusting stories. I will tell you about the Aghoris who live in India. They do all sorts of disgusting things, and their key idea is that people get disgusted by these things, but we understand that they are just thoughts in your mind, so we don't get disgusted. So next time I will tell you about the Aghori Sadhus, and with that we'll call it a day. Unless you don't have any more questions, we'll call it a day for today, and I hope to see you. Sorry, I forgot to make another announcement. Next time we'll be meeting on Wednesday, not Thursday. So same time, Thursday. If you have a problem with that, just let me know. But we'll be meeting Wednesday 7:30 instead of Thursday 7:30. Only for next week. I had to shift the date because of something that I couldn't cancel. So with that, we'll call it a day. And I wish you all the best. And I wish you, let's all together discover the real nature of our mind and find this ultimate solution, how we can short circuit all these shortcomings the sensual pleasures inherently have, that all the bad things I discussed about happiness. So let's try to avoid that part and try to see how we can have this happiness minus the negative side of it, minus all the negative traits. Good night to you, and have a great evening.